Hello, everybody, and welcome to a NOCD workshop facing relationship OCD together. I'm Tracie Ibrahim. I am a therapist and the Chief Compliance Officer of NOCD, and we have a fabulous guest today who will introduce themselves.
Hi, I'm Haley Jakobson. I'm a queer author and content creator. I use she, her pronouns. A big fan of NoCD and very excited to chat all things ROCD today.
Yes, I am super excited. This topic comes up so much. So we are here to answer a lot of questions. We will have a Q&A for the last 30 minutes. Please make sure that you are putting your Q&A questions in the Q&A section and not the chat because we will not see it. So just a little introduction to the webinar. If you have to leave early or something like that, have no fear. It's going to be recorded. You will receive an email. Yeah, so I think we will just jump right in and get started and kind of give you a real life example of well, first of all, like what is ROCD? What is relationship OCD? How does it, differ from typical relationship doubts? We'll just give you a very brief overview, and then Haley is going to tell you all about the personal ways that this has affected her. So, relationship OCD, just like all other themes of OCD, is massive amounts of intrusive doubt that you never get to the end of. You never solve it. It doesn't stick. Even if you think you solved it, it comes back and it becomes unsolved very quickly. Um, OCD can attach to relationships in multiple different ways. It can say, oh, you thought you were attracted to your partner, but really you are a different sexual orientation, or oh, you have different values, or oh, um, you know, you're a different gender than you used to think that you were, and your partner's not attracted to that gender. So it can come up in 50,000 different ways because OCD is creative. So we're just going to go right into Haley's story and talk about how it affected you personally.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, I've done one of these before on like spirituality OCD. And I think I like the way that I began it, which is that I said, and it's true for this time around, like this is an exposure for me. Like I don't want anybody in this webinar, this room, I can't see any of you, but anyone here to be like, oh, Haley's conquered ROCD. Like she's over it and now her relationship's perfect. That's not how OCD works. And I still have ROCD. I still have other themes of OCD. I'm just at a point in my recovery that I have a lot of tools and resources in my tool belt, and I'm no longer sort of like crying and shaking on the floor in, the worst panic of my life. I am, 5 years after being diagnosed with ROCD, I am still in the same relationship. It would be fine if I wasn't, by the way. Um, but yeah, I just want to say that. Like part of why I do these is because they're good exposures for me. Because that's what like an ongoing relationship with exposure therapy is you find new ways to up the ante and like I don't know this one I think a lot of people could imagine why this would be crazy, right? Like I'm getting up here and like sort of definitively talking about OCD, which is um so antithetical to how we even talk about OCD in the first place. So want to start with that. I have had OCD my whole life, but I was only diagnosed 5 years ago. Um, I I started dating my partner about a year before I was diagnosed, and it was the most sort of like serious relationship that I had found myself in. I thought my relationships prior had been serious, but this was a person who I was like, whoa, I could see this happening for a long time. And I had spent such a long time hoping and wishing to find that person. And then I finally got him. And the first 6 months of our relationship were awesome. And then my brain decided to totally flip that on its head and torture me with doubt. I had no idea that I had OCD. I've been in therapy for 8 years. Um, Talk therapy. And I felt like I was sort of living this lie and had this big bad secret. And the way, and I always felt that way, even before getting a specific ROCD diagnosis. OCD always has made me feel like I have a big secret. I'm hiding something. Um, and this was during the pandemic. We were sort of forced to move into together. It was a newer relationship. I had never lived with somebody before. And my brain really couldn't handle it. And I started to become so panicked, so overcome with doubt. Um, my compulsions were out of control. I was on Reddit for hours and hours and hours every day. My Google compulsion is one of the strongest that I have, or one of the hardest that I have, besides just active rumination, checking, questioning. Um, and the rumination was nonstop. My ROCD was my full-time job. There was really nothing else I could think about, nothing else I could enjoy. Um, and it was also compounded with sexual orientation OCD. I'm in a queer relationship with a trans person, and I'm bisexual. So I got options, right? I have this really fluid, open, wonderful sexuality, but I also have OCD, which says you need to choose. It needs to be black and white. You need to be sure. You can't be lying. Don't lie that you're gay. So, a beautiful combination of things, the ROCD and the sexual orientation OCD. And this it was ruining my relationship. It was because I was keeping this all inside. I was distancing myself from my partner. Meanwhile, we're quarantined together. And would I would get so overcome and overstimulated and distressed by my obsessions that when I finally like let it out, it would just be me sobbing and them not knowing why, or them not being able to understand what was going on with me. Um, and it got so bad that my days really did consist of me just Googling all day long, whether or not I was in the right relationship. How do you know that you're in the right relationship? Um, just everything, like the way that sort of romance culture infiltrates everything we do. I was looking down any channel to find proof that this was my soulmate, my one and only, all of that crap. And eventually I hit rock bottom. I did sort of essentially try to break up with them. Um, and then and then I like just sort of fully lost my mind and had to go stay with my parents. Um, and during that time, during my Googling, I found a YouTube video on ROCD, just randomly came up out of the internet ether, and I watched it, and I was like, is it possible that I'm not the worst person that has ever existed and I could have this thing? And I had just enough of my wise mind that I could consider that I wasn't the scum of the earth and maybe there was something else going on with me. Um, and I showed my therapist. She said, I must have missed this. I'm so sorry. We had been working together for 8 years. I stopped seeing her and I immediately went into exposure therapy. And it's been 5 years of like really, really committing to recovery. I OCD, having OCD, being an OCD advocate, being in a support group weekly. At the start I was in ERP weekly or twice weekly. Now I'm bi-weekly. And I have just worked so hard to get my life back and to get my relationship back and to show up as the best partner that I can be, which I do a pretty good job of, even though my brain, says otherwise. Um, and I've learned that the content of my thoughts really doesn't matter, and that every day I have the choice whether or not to break up with my boyfriend. And usually we have like a nice dinner planned, so I prefer not to, but like tomorrow I could make a different decision. And I know that there's probably a varying spectrum of folks in this room, folks who maybe are undiagnosed, folks who are diagnosed, but they're really going through it. Um, I'm sure there are people trying to compare your story to mine. And if, the evidence doesn't match up entirely, you don't have ROCD and you are destined for relationship failure. And maybe that's true and maybe it's not. But I know so much about OCD now, and I know so much about how it manifests in myself. And my number one mantra, besides maybe not, is urgency is not my friend. And everything OCD has ever made me do has been so urgent and so panicked and so unmoored from myself and my wisdom. And with a real commitment to therapy, I've been able to find a lot more peace in my life. And I've also unlearned a lot about relationships that were never serving me. I was definitely like in the cult of love, and I'm so happy not to be a part of it anymore. My life is so much more vibrant now that I don't define my worth by whether or not I'm with my soulmate. And I have a loving and happy relationship. Maybe not every day it's happy, but there's a contentedness there. And I have a lot of other things that I'm interested in my life that don't really have much to do with finding my other half anymore. I like how much work I put into this relationship. And um, I think OCD, like managing OCD in a couple, um, necessitates a kind of commitment to each other that is so unbelievably beautiful. Um, and I'm so grateful to be able to look at love through this lens, which I never would have been able to do had I not gotten the help that I needed.
I love that you brought that up too, because the thought that there's one person out there for everybody and that our whole goal in life is to find that one person is exactly what sets every single person up for failure.
Every person. And
And
it's
just,
it's so it's such a reductive way to look at life. And if folks follow me on Instagram, I recently posted a reel where I was talking about how like I think a lot of people treat crushes and falling in love as a hobby,
yeah,
and that's not a hobby.
no, it doesn't even sound like a fun hobby, honestly. It sounds exhausting,
Yeah,
you
it is
know?
exhausting. It is exhausting because I was on that hamster wheel for a really long time. Um, yeah. So what are what should we talk about next?
Let's talk about it. Well, let's talk about a couple of things. One is, um, I love that you found ERP therapy because I have the same deal. I was in therapy for 1,000 years until, maybe less than slightly under 1,000, before I got proper diagnosis and treatment with ERP therapy. And just, I think sometimes it helps for people to even go like, what is this? Like, how is this going to solve this for me? How does this solve it? ERP therapy is for all themes of OCD. And what it does is exactly like what you were talking about. It teaches us that that urgency that we feel, is not actually valid or worth our time. And how do you learn to live with that discomfort without trying to escape it through doing these compulsions that are actually making it worse as compared to, um, just not falling for that urgency. We have a similar mantra. I'm kind of excited. Mine is, this urgency is not my emergency. So
Ooh, I love that.
we have similar mantras because I also have relationship OCD, and yep, sometimes it comes up, in different ways. Like you were saying, I love that you brought up, is this the right person? Is it the perfect person? Is it my soulmate? Is this my other half? Which I also find to be pretty upsetting. Like, you're
Yeah.
a whole person, you're amazing. And like, how does that connect to another whole person as opposed to like, I'm missing half of myself? Who plugs that in and makes me a whole person is also not a great way to go about trying to find a relationship, right?
Yeah. And I think that's so much, I think one of the misconceptions about OCD is that like your obsessions aren't real. And I think that's not nuanced enough. There's always not a reason that you have OCD, but OCD attaches to the things that we care about, right? It's ego dystonic, meaning like it takes the things that we value and turns them on their head so much that all of a sudden we're sort of living in opposition to our value. And I think that it is all fine and well to want to be in a fulfilling relationship. Um, but I think the OCD component is really it's always about certainty, right? We want to achieve some sort of certainty. And I think love is one that OCD globs onto so much because we've been taught in our society that like love heals everything. That it's sort of this universal salve that's going to cure us from all of our pain. And it's going to make life so magical and make life so much better. And so, of course, OCD is going to attack that because if that is the great healer, if love is on top of the hierarchy of something that we should achieve in our life, why wouldn't OCD attack that? Sometimes I say that like OCD is, well, I think you said it earlier, like OCD is not very creative, right? I always joke that as a writer, like the least creative part of me is my OCD. Like it's so reductive. My intrusive thoughts lack so much nuance. It's almost embarrassing to me as someone who feels like I have a good grasp on the human language and is able to be creative. Um, and so I don't know. I think I want to validate for everybody here that, like, I understand why you care about being in a relationship. I'm not saying that you shouldn't care about that. I'm just saying that we can figure out ways to not be tortured over it.
Exactly. And sometimes people get upset when I say this, but I'm going to drop this cold hard fact right now. There is not one perfect person for anybody. There is multiple people that are amazing that we could be amazing with. Sorry. So to solve whether or not you've reached the top of this sort of like, but did I find the best one, it is a useless search anyway.
Yeah.
How are you feeling about your current relationship? How is It says it check the major boxes of things you're looking for. That's what's important. There
Right.
is no perfect human.
Right.
Just growing up, I think about the terrible, I won't name them, but things that we watch growing up as kids that show this ridiculous prince and princess just, and the magical thing happens and you look magical and they look magical and you come together and then you live in a castle and at all times there's just like glitter flying off of your aura because you've found the right person. And I would hope that nobody's looking for that because in real relationships, stuff's not magical every day, all day at
Right.
all.
Right.
So don't
Right.
evaluate that as a problem. Evaluate that as like reality.
Yeah, yeah, of course. And I also know that there are people watching this and listening to us that are probably thinking like, "Oh, these two are really jaded about love." Like
Yeah.
my person is out there and I've got a direct line to God and God is telling me because OCD, excuse this reference, everybody. I'm very anti J.K. Rowling, but I like to say that OCD wants to Harry Potter us. Like it makes us believe that we are the chosen one and the only one, and that we know something that nobody else knows. And sometimes I just say to myself, like, you're not that special, right? Like, I don't have a direct line to God. As many times as my intrusive thoughts have told me that that's my intuition or higher power speaking directly through me, um, I've learned that well, first of all, if I had an intuition, which I don't really let myself have because I have OCD, I don't think it would be so mean to me. I don't think it would be so self-flagellating. But, I say to myself, you're not the chosen one. You're just like everybody else. And so I don't know, but yeah, if you want to perceive us as jaded, you totally can. But
Totally can.
I think we
Yeah.
are onto something.
I feel like we are. And I always say I've been with the same partner for 23 years,
Wow.
okay? And I have zero certainty that it's going to last another day. Every day I take it moment by moment because I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know. I don't know how long each of us will live. I don't know if I'm going to meet somebody that for some reason I decide is more amazing and checks more boxes or that person will. I don't know. Can we just be in this moment, which is the only moment where we have any control? Is like, how's this dinner going?
Right.
Great,
Right. Right.
fine. Keep
Right.
your world really small. Stop trying to solve for forever.
Yeah. Yeah, and also the thing about OCD, especially when you're in the height of it, like I only say this now because I needed and continue to need the utmost compassion and empathy, but the nature of OCD can make us a little bit selfish because it's all about us all the time. Am I am I doing this right? Am I making the right decision? On and on and on and on. And for long swaths of my relationship where ROCD was at the helm, like it's sort of I liken it to like my partner being sober and me being under the influence. And so I'm not here. I'm not present. I'm living this double life, and that means that I, without my skills and without my resources and my tools, I can't show up for my partner. And that is my value. I want to be in a balanced, nourishing relationship. We can talk all we want about the greatest love story of all time. But if I'm not able to show up for them because I am so all consumed by my brain because I'm not getting myself the help that I need, well, I'm not sure that that's a great relationship to be in. Like we need to be thinking about it that way instead of just, this sort of very head in the clouds fantasy version of what love is.
Absolutely. And because a lot of what happens, it does, it affects your partner. It affects how you show up for your partner. Like it's very selfish because we are always in ourselves, even though we are also very tortured. I think
Yeah.
it's important to talk about our partners as well, having especially partners that don't have OCD or don't understand OCD. This can be very wearing on a relationship, whether it's asking for reassurance constantly. Do you think that we're going to make it forever? Did you think that I did this? Am I good enough for you? Do I look good in this? How is this? All of the various questions that can happen, or whether it's confessing, oh my gosh, I saw a really hot person earlier and I needed to tell you. They were in my dreams, but I just thought I should tell you about that. And so partners play a big role in recovery and treatment. Learning how to do things that in ERP that help you to help your OCD to pipe down a little bit as well, right? Whether it's like, do you think we're going to last forever? And it's like, I don't know. I don't know what forever means. Thanks for asking. So pulling your partner in when you are getting ERP treatment, I think is very critical because partners are usually trying to help us feel better. And a lot of times they're feeding our OCD without realizing it.
Yeah, and a big part of that is because we're making them. We're
Because
pulling them
we
in.
force it.
Yeah, we're forcing it to happen. We're pulling them into compulsions. One of the most interesting things I've found in my relationship dynamic, once I got over, how fucking horrible I felt telling my partner that I have a branch of OCD that makes me constantly question whether I love them or not. Yeah, that fucking sucks to have to do. I think having a deep an educated understanding of what OCD is, especially that component of it is ego dystonic, it attaches to the things that we care most about. I think that's one really huge for partners to understand. And then two, the thing that my partner and I realized is once you have those tools to to cope with OCD, it's a little bit cut and dry. Like we are just like not engaging in compulsions together. We can do anything else together. We just cannot engage in the compulsions. No reassurance seeking, not I mean, obviously that's such a big one. Not entering into these like marathon conversations about our relationship, not compulsively confessing, definitely not spilling all of our worst, most horrible, intrusive thoughts to our partner, right? Once we sort of stop that, once we're able, my partner and I, my OCD has a name. His name is Josh. He's my roommate for life. He works in finance. He's really not my guy, but he's there, right? And so we have a shorthand where we say, like, is Josh in the room with us? And if Josh is in the room with us, I got to go do something else. That's not fair to Carter, my partner, that he's talking to Josh because he's not talking to Haley. And so now Carter has said to me, like, it's kind of easy to deal with your OCD. I just basically say, I can't talk to you right now. And that really works for us as a couple. It doesn't mean that he can't comfort me. He can validate me. He can validate, I'm really sorry that your OCD is so loud today. Should we go watch this movie? Should we go take a walk? We have a drop down of options so that he can care for me just like I care for him when he's in a big anxiety spiral. But we don't need to engage in the content and we don't need to have big relationship conversations because that's what OCD wants, right? And that's what we're trying to teach our brains to lower the fucking stakes, right? We're not like surgeons in a hospital. Nobody's dying right now. We're not trying to save a life. Our brain is just sort of like, are you sure? Are you sure? Are you sure? And like, we kind of need it to just shut up in a compassionate way. And the way that we do that is with our ERP resources and our tools. And then you get to enjoy being with your partner. It's not
Yeah.
like you're free of the doubt, right?
No.
But the volume turns down when we teach our brains, I don't need to engage with this. Then the volume starts to turn down and all of a sudden we're watching the movie together on the couch, right? I'm here. Haley's here sitting on the couch. Josh is not here. Um, or he is, but he's sort of sitting in the corner, like looking at sports on his phone. You know what I mean?
I do kind of checked out. That's what I think about. I always say that I mean, I have so many themes of OCD, but I think of it as my background noise and I don't let it be my theme song because my theme song is way more amazing than that background noise, which is like, music I don't really want to listen to. So yeah, absolutely. So partners, just know, be part of the process. You think you're helpful, saying like, don't worry, yeah, we will last forever. You are the best one. We are all this stuff. Just know that it's actually making it a little bit worse. The best thing to do is to not address it. You're like, I don't know. Because the truth is, you don't know. You don't know the answers of certainty that people with ROCD are looking for. Um, we can go to the questions now. I see we have a lot of questions. Oh my gosh, look at this. So, how do you deal with the guilt of ROCD and fears surrounding leading them on? That's the hardest part of this theme for me. What do you think?
Um, I think one of the things that my ERP therapist said to me early on, which gave me a lot of comfort, was that often people with ROCD are the best partners because we take our relationship so seriously.
Hmm.
And I mean, people with OCD, we're hyper moral and ethical. So we put a lot more thought um, into um, into things that involve other people um, than other people. Other people are kind of just like walking through the world, like maybe I hurt someone, maybe I didn't, and we're like, oh my God, like I am the worst person, like shackle me now.
Hmm.
And so I think one of the ways I talk to my guilt and shame, which is it is compulsive for me to sort of invite in shame, punishment, self-flagellation. And I think one of the things I remind myself is like I might be leading them on, but I also can go pick up their favorite coffee right now. Like I might be leading them on, and I can also listen to what a hard day of work that they've had. I can show up in my actions and if we break up tomorrow, we break up tomorrow. But at least I showed up for them today.
That's exactly right. Yep. And I don't know any answer that OCD would ever have, even if we told you that we knew 100% sure whether or not, you're definitely not leading them on. You're welcome. Your doubt would be right back there. OCD doesn't even sit when you give it an answer, which by the way, there's not always an answer. So that's why I'm always like, why bother? I'm not going to answer you because even if I come up with certainty, you're going to steal it. So. Our next question, actually, I feel like we can answer this question and another question at the same time. So, um, regarding our ROCD as a parent, I'm a 41-year-old dad, recently diagnosed with OCD, find myself hovering over my kids regularly, especially in social situations, obsessing over the kids' social events, if they behave well enough, being social enough. And my wife and I are discussing ways to generate exposure therapy as parents to kids. And I'm glad that you brought that up because relationship OCD can show up in any relationship. I recently realized with one of the clients I'm working with, he was having deep relationship OCD with his partner's dog. Am I good enough? She loves that dog. I don't know if I love the dog like she loves the dog. I'm not sure if I'm taking good care of the dog. What if I like the dog not that well? Does it mean I'm not a good partner for, you know, going on and on? It can happen with your kids. It can happen with your friends. Am I a good enough friend? Do they like that friend more than me? Do I show up well enough? Am I not a good friend? And so it's the same no matter where it's showing up. We still need to do the same thing, which is not try to solve it. I have relationship OCD with a couple of my kids, but not all of them for some reason. It's just, did you spend enough time? Are you spending enough time? Are you doing this? Are they behaving in the way that you hope they would as adults? Are you being the most supportive in all of the ways and all of these things? And I remember that I have values. I'm like, what is at the basis of this question right now? Did you speak to your daughter that lives in Seattle enough? And the answer is, I don't know the answer to that, but it sounds like I want to connect to my daughter. So I'm going to pick up the phone and make a call and connect to my daughter. And that's one thing I can do instead of sit here and try and solve some unsolvable question. Like, what is enough? Is there a manual that tells you how often you're supposed to call and whether it was connected enough? So let's see. How do you handle a partner with scrupulosity and ROCD? It's hard to figure out how to answer his religious questions and know if I'm feeding into reassurance behaviors.
And I would say don't answer any religious questions
Yeah.
at all. If
Yeah.
one therapist that I really admire says if there's a 0.01% chance that it's OCD, you treat it like OCD. And one of the things, for the partners listening, one of the things that my partner and I talk about a lot is that the way that we treat OCD to anyone who doesn't have it seems unkind because we're taught that to be a kind and empathetic person, we should listen and we should advise and we should reassure, right? That's not love for someone with OCD. For me, love is when somebody says no to me. That feels like love. Like I get a little agitated. I have this feeling of like, no, 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 let's engage, let's do it, let's do it. And then I have a detachment and it's like relief of like, that's really what I need is for somebody not to engage with me. And you can say to your partner, I'm so sorry that your brain is so loud and you have so many questions around religion. That must be so difficult and so uncomfortable. I can't talk about that with you, but is there a different way that we could give you some comfort right now? That is the best thing that you can do for your partner.
That's absolutely true. And anyone who has OCD in your life, your friend, your kid, your partner, it's, I think of it because it's invisible and people don't realize they're doing harm when they're answering these types of questions. But really, that is the situation. When you think about it, if you knew that you were giving a little teaspoon of a little bit of poison that would make somebody sick, you wouldn't do it. And
Yeah, so
providing
true.
reassurance is providing a little bit. It's like, oh, do you need help? And you think that you're being helpful because traditionally, if someone didn't have OCD, you could indeed be reassuring. But we have OCD and you can't do that. And you can't
Yeah,
try and give a certainty because if you knew that you were giving, so I try and remind myself too. Sometimes I'm like, well, if somebody's asking me and I really want to give reassurance, say to like one of my kids, I'm like, nope, I love them too much to give them that little bit of poison that makes them worse. And it helps
love
me
that.
feel like I'm doing the right thing. So
That's so good. I'm thinking, why don't we scroll down just so that folks who have questions later don't feel totally left out? Is it okay if I
yeah,
take
go
one?
for it.
Somebody says, how scary are exposures supposed to be, especially when beginning? So this is such a good and important question. So when you, and obviously, Tracie, you can speak to this. I'll speak from my experience. My therapist and I sort of mapped out a hierarchy of my fears from exposures that would be most tolerable to least tolerable. And we worked our way up to get to those really scary exposures. At the beginning, we like started small. Everything on your list is gonna be scary, but there's certain things that are like way, way up there, and then things that are like, okay, I am scared, but like this is what I can tackle. Um, you know, OCD is ruled by fear, so everything is going to be scary, and we have to show our brains that we are resilient and we can sort of walk alongside our fear and take actions and live according to our values. And I know somebody else asked, what do exposures look like for you with an ROCD theme? So I can speak to that. So one of the things that you can do in ERP therapy is an imaginal, and it's essentially like a script. So you write for me, what I've done is my therapist and I have written out a script of like worst, 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 worst fear. I think one of them we did was like leaving my partner at the altar, like so dramatic. Like OCD is such a fucking soap opera. Like it's just ridiculous to me that like I would, get to the end of the aisle and be like, nope, I'm out. And then right, and so we, got to that point. And then you write like, how everybody at the wedding would feel, how your partner would feel, what life would look like for you. For me, it's like always like I'm alone for the rest of my life because I'm such a terrible person. So you kind of say it all. My therapist types it out. She reads it out loud to me. I sort of like sit, try not to engage in compulsion, just sit and listen. And then my therapist records those imaginals and I listen to them like a meditation throughout the week. So that's one exposure that you can do. I have a lot of like visual intrusive thoughts too. Um, like, one of my fixations around sexuality is that like I prefer a penis to a vagina. And so I was getting a lot of intrusive images of penises for like a year. It sucked. Like I don't really need that like happening in the middle of lunch with my dad, you know what I mean? And so we just sort of like went on Google together and looked at a bunch of penises together. And that was an exposure. And I kind of sat there and, she asked me questions of like, which one do you like the best? And, like, and just sort of tolerating, like, am I going to sit here and realize like I, bow down to the altar of penises? Um, and yeah, had that experience. Um, I don't really have those intrusive images, which is nice, but they could come back, It's not about curing it, but they could come back. So those are some examples. I don't know if you would want to do any
Yeah. I
examples.
would say for sure, like everybody has their own individual sort of what's the worst versus the not the worst sort of, so you definitely want to work with somebody to help you build a hierarchy of those kinds of things. Sometimes it's just helping your partner not provide you reassurance and you sitting with the maybes. Sometimes it's just, yeah, okay, maybe that could happen. And then what? And then what might you do? Oh, move on.
Yeah.
Oh, what? Move on. You're going to make me do a move on thought? Like, yeah, that's a possibility.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's so many different things. But I will say a lot of people say they're afraid of ERP. By the time you get to the top of your hierarchy of fears and exposures, they're not as scary as they used to be.
Yeah.
I also just, as a very quick snippet, somebody asked about ICBT therapy. It is not an evidence-based practice. It does not have the longitudinal studies. It has not been meta-analyzed. So no, I don't recommend it. The gold standard treatment is exposure response prevention therapy. Um, so
Yeah. I will also say, maybe ERP isn't for everybody, but I've been in a weekly support group for years. I will say the folks who do ICBT seem to struggle a lot more than the folks who really commit to ERP. That is my lived experience from what I have seen. And I have very intimate relationships with my support group people, and that I have absolutely noticed that to be true.
yeah, I've noticed the same thing in my lived experience as well. Sometimes people just they'll say, but ERP didn't work for me. And I'm like, oh, it'll never work for you. It's that we give you tools you have to use outside of here. So
Yeah. I
nobody gets better in a therapist office. You get better with those tools than you take them outside where you
Yeah.
live all
It's
day, every
that
day.
is so true. I feel like a lot of people have this question, and I get this question a lot on my Instagram. I do a weekly Q&A. It's like people with ROCD are sort of desperate to know, how do I differentiate between like real problems and my ROCD? Um, you kind of don't in some ways. You kind of don't. One of the ways that we can look at it though is once you define your values with your therapist, you really and if values are very foreign to people, there's a values deck by Lisa Congdon. Maybe one of the moderators can Google that and put it in the chat to help you sort of figure out what your values are, and you do that with your ERP therapist too. So you have relationship values, right? Like, and they might be, the classics like family planning, politics, um, sort of like financial planning for the future, like the heavy hitters, and then maybe you have smaller ones. For me, I don't want to move out of New York City, and so value for me is I want a partner who's like down to raise kids in New York City and not moving. And so you figure out things like that. And when something's happening in your relationship and it's in opposition to your values or it's getting like really clunky with your values, that is a time where you can kind of be like, this is not so value aligned. And what are my choices here? And it's done from your a much more grounded and rational approach as opposed to a lot of urgency and panic. And one of the things that I say is I don't live a feelings-based lifestyle. I live a values-based lifestyle because feelings are fleeting and my OCD makes me have really intense feelings that I can't trust, but I can trust my values. And so if you are interested in having like real recovery from OCD, you have to metabolize what I just said. Because if
Yeah.
you continue to think, my gut's going to tell me, my intuition's going to tell me, if I'm crying, it means this. If I'm sick to my stomach, it means this. If I'm not turned on, it means this, then you're not going to get better. If you're willing to say, maybe feelings are not for me as much as they are for the next person,
Mhm.
maybe values are, you're on to something.
Yeah. Feelings are not facts, everybody. Thoughts are not facts. Images are not facts. It just is what it is. And um, I like that there's a lot of different questions here, sort of about telling the difference between reassurance and that is OCD related versus not, or asking for validation versus, you know, OCD feels urgent. Let's just start with that. OCD tends to ask questions that nobody could answer with 100% certainty without taking a leap of faith. Most people are like, no, no, I know for sure. This is like for sure. And I'm like, is it though? Or are you taking a leap of faith? How do you know? How do you know for sure? If it's something we can't know for sure, asking other people for opinions is pointless. Um, and most of the time, the things we're asking for are, and are something that we can't solve. Now, if there's real values, like what Haley was talking about, like I value spending shared time together. I value travel. I value um, having my partner be physical and cozy with me. So if we weren't being cozy and physical, that would be a real issue coming up based on a value that I had. And it wouldn't feel the same. It wouldn't, that is answerable. It is a conversation we can have. Hey, I noticed we used to be super cuddly and we haven't been as physical and cuddly lately. Can we talk a little bit about that? That's going to feel very different than, does this mean that we're not made for each other anymore? Oh, that's not answerable. And it's also doesn't even go anywhere along with the values and all that stuff. Oh, I saw somebody attractive. Now I feel like I've cheated on my partner. I saw all of those questions out there. Fun fact, just because you're dating or married to somebody doesn't mean other people become unattractive. It's okay that attractive people live out there and that you see them and that you acknowledge it. So I like to put that out there because a lot of people get very stressed out. Like, what does it mean? Does it mean maybe I'm not as attractive because I found this other person attractive? I'm like, hey, there's attractive people out there. What are the rules in your relationship is what I always go with. What are your relationship rules? Like, can you be flirty? Maybe you can't be flirty. Maybe you can do this. Maybe you can't do that. So there's no hard, fast rule. It's about your relationship. But I don't think there's any relationship where they're like, you may not use your eyes to see people that might be attractive to you. Um, that would be an unreasonable relationship to be in now, wouldn't it? You would have to walk around blindfolded.
So
How do you
true.
how do you control that? I can imagine New York City. You like make an announcement. You're like, only unattractive people, which I don't know what that means, can be outside when I run to get a bagel. Like, I mean, how does that work in life? It's not even reasonable. So
Yeah, that's so true. It's so true. And I bet a bunch of folks follow Allegra Cassens, who's a really good friend of mine and has an amazing Instagram, and she's an OCD therapist. And she always says, what you resist persists. So if you're trying to find no one sexy, you're gonna find everyone sexy. Um, and I don't know. I mean, we assign like a lot of guilt and shame to that, but our thoughts are not our actions, you know?
Yeah, that is absolutely true. That is absolutely true. I see a question. My biggest fear was my partner finding someone better. Last week, he told me he wants to stop what we had and he is now seeing someone else. Well, that's yucky. I feel like my fears came true. How do I cope? And, that's just that is just like that is the actual life circumstances that sometimes somebody finds somebody else. It could be us, it could be somebody else. How do you deal with it? The same way you deal with any other sort of heartbreak. Take good care of yourself. Be really nice to yourself because it's not about you.
Yeah.
Um,
And your OCD is gonna probably tell you that you manifested it, right? That your thoughts became your reality. Maybe you're super powerful, you know? And if that's the case, I mean, I would look into some like monetary compensation for having some really witchy magical skills. That really sucks.
FBI.
Yeah, that really sucks, and I'm so sorry that that's happening to you. I can't imagine what that would feel like. And I also believe that you're a really resilient person, and you will find a way to manage this. But I would be really cognizant of how much of your brain is telling you that you made this happen. And just like let's have some curiosity around those thoughts.
That's right. And as heartbreaking as it is, you know what? You're gonna just find somebody else and that person, you'll have a different relationship. And this is exactly why we don't try to find somebody that's forever perfect because that's not real and it doesn't exist.
Right, right.
Let's see, what else do we have here? Any favorites you want to answer?
Um, yeah, let me grab one. Oh, again for talking to your partners about ROCD, like you get a recording of this webinar, send it to them, have them watch it. There's so many resources online. Send them my Instagram, send them I have 3 Q&A highlights saved under OCD. Like outsource. It is so much labor for you to explain your OCD, and it can be so triggering, especially if you're early days in recovery. There's a wealth of information that you can send your partner for a little bit of homework. And then if you are in ERP, you can bring them in for a session. That is completely normal. I know so many people who do that, regardless if they have ROCD or not. I mean, there's a mental health professional in front of you, like let them take the wheel for a little bit. But you can absolutely outsource this. And if that's so uncomfortable to think about, like you not explaining it the perfect way that you would want to explain it, then consider it an exposure, right? Like they might read something that you really don't want them to know. Um,
Yeah, that's
maybe.
absolutely true. Yep. One of my favorite, another resource too, is the Complete Guide to ROCD by Kimberly Quinlan,
Oh yeah.
where she talks a lot about that, your anxiety toolkit. Yeah, go to valid, don't fall down the Reddit rabbit hole. Go to
Oh
valid
no.
places. Go to Haley. I'm on Instagram at Taboo Tracy. We only speak about facts. We only speak about things that are real as far as treatment goes, things of that nature. But don't just go, you'll find something somewhere that is not and will send you in a spiral. So
Yeah.
very important.
Go to, yeah, professionals or advocates like I am. I call Reddit the devil's handbook. I am completely Reddit sober. Um, I it is where bad things happen. Very bad things. And you could be taking advice from a 14-year-old in the middle of Alabama. Do you know what I
For
mean?
real.
So
Yeah.
let's not do that.
Yeah, talk about creepy. I like this question because I love when people are like, okay, this goes with where you're like, well, this doesn't fit my thing, therefore it's not relationship OCD. This person's asking, I actually have the opposite of what I hear is the normal compulsion confessing. I had not told my partner for a long time, and even now that I rarely share the content of my thoughts because I'm scared of hurting his feelings. Would sharing the content or some thoughts I have be a good exposure for me? Just the thought of him hearing what I think freaks me out. And I think we've almost answered this in that no, saying what is going on with OCD is not helpful. Our content is not important. I can't drive that home enough. As somebody with like taboo themes and all the stuff going on, content is not important. Your thoughts are not important. The images you're seeing, like Haley said, you know, a shitload of penises. It doesn't matter. One penis, 42 penises, 58,000 penises. It's all just images, okay? It doesn't mean that you're going to suddenly just, you know, become penis crazed. Um, and so, first of all, it's okay to say I have OCD. It's okay to send resources on OCD. It's okay to send valid resources on relationship OCD, but it is never important or even a decent exposure. No, I don't know any valid ERP therapist that would be like, go do this compulsion as an exposure,
No.
um,
No.
because that wouldn't help. And
Yeah.
just start a cycle.
Yeah, I think that there's ways to like you end up doing exposures with your partner. For me, relationship milestones are really, really triggering. I don't want to celebrate anniversaries. I don't want my mom got my partner and I a pot, like a very nice saucepan, and she was like, "You'll have it for the rest of your life." I was like, "Kill me now." Like
Oh,
I don't know that I'm gonna want this pot. And you know, if we break up, who gets the pot? You know, and then how do I tell my mom? Like, do I give the pot back to my mom? You know, Josh had a field day with that. But like my partner knows all of those things now that anniversaries are really hard. Valentine's Day, oh, hate, you know,
ah,
I could vomit. But they're really important to him. So we find a way to celebrate. And one of the things I know we're just about time, one of the things that's so important for OCD and especially having a relationship with somebody who has OCD is levity and humor. My partner is egging on my OCD all the time because humor is OCD's kryptonite.
yeah.
We took a month-long trip together, big exposure for me. What if in this quiet and solitude together, I really finally realized that we're not meant to be together? And he said to me at one point, he's like, "Ah, what a nice last trip together. You know, this is this is a really great way to end things, you know?" And we say to each other, like we joke about it all the time. And it brings it, oh my God, it makes me feel like a human again to be able to laugh. And someone had said in the comments over here, like, what do you do when OCD just feels so dark and so heavy? Is you bring in that levity and you bring in that humor. I mean, I know someone in my support group who's really worried that she wants to have sex with her dog, and so her husband like mimes humping their dog all the time, you know,
I
just
love
to like
that.
egg her on. And I think that's love. Like that's
Yes.
a profound example of love for somebody with OCD. Like that fills my heart so much, you know? I have a million examples of how to bring in levity to your, you know, with your people. Um, all of my friends like are razzing me all the time because they know my triggers, they know my obsessions, and it's such love. It's such love because that's not reassurance. That's like
Yeah.
that's egging on the maybe.
That's a great friend. And I want to just double down on that and say I got better using humor. I use humor with everybody that I treat. It's actually known as something called cognitive diffusion. It helps it feel less sucky. And people all be like, "But this is serious. It's serious.
It's
How could you
serious.
laugh about it, Haley? It's about penises and cheating at the end of your relationship." And you're like, "No, it's not, because content isn't important."
It's not important.
Making it
Yeah.
funny, yeah, best partners, best friends. Yep, my poop is one of my worst contamination OCDs. Good friend mailed me poop. I mean, Friends help friends, not compulse. Partners help partners, not compulse.
That's right.
Um,
That's right.
just want to thank everybody for coming today. If you're looking for evidence-based treatment, you can come to NOCD. You can find us on all the socials. And you can go to nocd.com or treatmyocd.com, and you can sign up for a free consultation with us to find out more about coverage and all of those good things. So please come on down. Thank you so much to Haley Jakobson. I'm so glad we got to talk about stuff today.
Me too. Me too.
And yeah, you know what? Don't compulse. Live your best life. Your best life is an uncertain life. So
That's right. And you are not the exception to getting better. And if we didn't answer your question, I do a Q&A every Wednesday on my Instagram story. You are more than welcome to drop your question in there. I will not respond if you're looking for reassurance, but you can
mhm.
ask a wise mind question.
See, look at that. It's like somebody that cares about you. I do that as well. Somebody will be like, oh my gosh, just tell me if it's like this. And I'm like, it's probably going to be 1,000 times worse than that. Do you want to ask me again? And they're like,
Yeah.
not really.
Oh, I love that. I love to do no reassurance in the DMs. Um, Amazing. Thank you all so much for joining. I know it's fucking hard. I know it's
It's
torture.
fucking hard.
Recovery is more than possible, and you're not alone. Um, and ERP saves lives. It saved mine.
ERP saves lives, saved my life as well, saves lives
Mhm.
every single day. Oh my gosh, evidence-based treatment. Go get some. Peace out, y'all.